Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk about how to contribute to open source. When you start to contribute to an open source project, you need to keep in mind that what you actually are doing is entering into a community. Somebody has built some code and they have fostered a community around that code. And that community is something that you want to take part in and to be a good citizen in that community. So to be a good citizen of this community, the first thing you should look for in the documentation or in the project is if they have a code of conduct. And a code of conduct can be as easy as try not to make somebody mad, try not to hurt somebody, or try not to speak down to someone. It can be very precise in its wording, but most of the time I've found that code of conduct is just a way to show that in this community we have some rules and some guidelines that will help you to see that we will have a good conversation with each other, so we can create something wonderful together and don't left anyone out. Next up, a very important part is the license agreement. The license agreement is something that you need to agree to if you want to contribute code. So if you send something to a code repository where the license agreement says that they own the code and you don't have any right to use that code going forward, that's something that you need to be aware of and something that you need to be fine with. The code can be totally open, of course, and they can say that the code that you share to this project is open for anyone to use as ever they like, and that code may end up in a situation where they use that in, let's say, weapon software, and that's something that you need to be fine with as well. And these license agreements can be very simple, everything goes, or very restrictive, and it can be everything in between. And you need to be aware of it and need to be fine with what the license says, because a license for an open source project is the rule of law. So if you have something in the open source project and it's guided by a specific license, that's what this project is under. At least if they are using a license that is commonly accepted and have been tried in court and so on. Next up, if there is a README in the project, they might have language in the README just to get you started with the project so you can try it out and understand the project. They may also ask you for specific contribution in the README, or that they are looking for help in specific areas. So the README is just a little bit of a bulletin board where the code maintainers can give information to the community so they can pick up and do things. For instance, a community might need translations, they might need documentation, they might need help for other things, and these might be code repositories or they might be something else. And I want to point out that contributing to open source is not an easy task. I have been writing code for about 30 years, and I still think it's a little bit of a challenge to send code in or do some translations or write some documentation. I feel that it can be a bit hard to do, and I feel that it can be something that I struggle with a bit, but I think it's worth the time. So next up, we want to look into what kind of a change do we want to do, or is there a bug that we have found that we want to help out with, or is the community searching for someone to help out with a specific issue. So I would go in to the project reading the issues that are available in the issue tracker and see what kind of things are they working on at the moment. If I have a new feature that I want, perhaps somebody else have already suggested something similar, and I can upvote that suggestion, or I can write my own issue describing the problem as best as I can, so the maintainer of the project and the community can understand what you are looking for. And things that you are looking for is that if it's, for instance, a new feature, you want to describe this feature as best as possible, where you want it to be located, how you want it to function, and what you expect the outcome to be, and perhaps what you think the actual impact on the project will be. Another part that if you are submitting a bug, for instance, it could be good to describe where you found the bug, how to reproduce the bug, what you expect to happen, what actually happened, and also give the current version that you had problem with, and perhaps if you are using a specific device, in case of Android development or iOS development, it could be good to know what kind of operating system or other details about your test, so it can be reproduced by the community. And if we have figured out that we want to actually help out and submit something to the project, and we have discussed it in an issue, if it's a little bit bigger. If it's a very small change, you might not be required to discuss it first. The discussion can be in the actual pull request. So what is a pull request then? On GitHub, you can take any project on GitHub and fork it. And fork is actually not as in the old open source world where you fork the code and you start something new with a new community and you do a very large thing about it. A fork on GitHub is that you actually create your own copy of that code so you can work on it on your end. And Git is a set of local repositories. You can have one on your machine, you can have one on GitHub, and so on. So a good way to fork it, so GitHub has your own repository. And then you do your changes to your repository on GitHub in a new branch, and that branch you will then do a pull request to the current maintainer's repository, and with the changes that you want to make. So a pull request is a set of changes that you want to add to the current project. And when you do a pull request, the pull request can be tested by the project, it can be reviewed by the community, so one or more reviewers in the project can go through, read your code, read your comments. They can in turn give you comments and perhaps ask you to change things, to improve things, and so on your pull request. And to make this as easy as possible, it can be good to actually don't make that many mistakes. And I understand if you are new to development and so on, making mistakes can be something that feels bad, but we all make mistakes, so that's not the problem. What I'm looking for is to reduce the easy mistakes, things that you can actually easily look up and understand. And easily might not be, I know that depending on where you are in your career, things can be easy or hard, but I believe that these things are basic, at least. They are fundamental. So one of the fundamentals is actually how the code is structured, because every project that I have been a part of or written code to have some code structure, and they have some kind of semantics that they are using in order to make their code look similar. And in order to see what kind of a coding style that you want to follow, so that you don't need to have, for your pull request, okay, you need to change this, this, and this in your code because you don't follow our coding style. And things you can look for is for instance, where do they put the bracket in this language? Is the bracket after the word? Here they have actually used short notation for all their functions. So you can see here that the functions are actually just constants. So here we have some function, it's a short function, it has some lambda here with some input parameters, and then you have the function, and you see that the bracket doesn't start on a new line, it starts on the same line. And when it comes to the for loop, you have on the same line. And do we have any if statements here? So you can see that some of these things are common to this code. I have seen other code where they chose to have the brackets starting a function on a new line, and for loops and so on should also start on a new line, and that's a choice. It's a flavor of coding. So in order to make the code as readable as possible, you need to follow the same flavor of coding. And if you, for instance, write code a specific way and it's very different from the code style that the project you're using, it can be hard. And you might need to set your editor or IDE to actually guide you and help you to follow a specific guideline or a specific coding style in order to write the code in a similar way that it has been done before. And sometimes you can come to projects where it's very hard to find exactly what kind of coding style is used. And here we see that the else if and the else statement has the brackets on the same line as well. Some choose to actually have this on a separate line, that the else should start on a separate line. You also have this little war here if you should have spaces or tabs. So coding style can be a video of its own, because there is a lot to say about coding style. And when you have gone through and fixed, so you follow a specific coding style, the project might have, for instance, linting rules and might have a linter in the build tools. So if you run the actual build of that project, it might run a linter and you might get some linting errors. And making a pull request with linting errors will just stop dead in its tracks, because nobody will review that until those are solved. The same goes for tests. If there is tests written in the code and those fail because of your change, the code will also not be granted, because they will see that all tests didn't go through, and there's no reason to review something that fails their tests. On the other hand, if you need to do a change to the project and you need to change some test, and you add some new functionality, for instance, if this pull request is a little bit larger, then it's a good practice to actually add your own tests as well, and adding tests that both document your new feature and also tests the important parts and shows your feature off. So you can actually write tests in a manner that you show that this feature should work in this way. So for instance, if you have the use case, we should have a red button that people can click on. The test case might be click on the red button, and that will show the community that you want to add a red button that should be clickable, and it's also showing them that the click is actually happening. So that's a very bad example, but I hope that you understand what I mean with creating test cases that actually document and shows the feature working. When you are done with all this and your pull requests test goes through and the linting is done and you actually get a review and somebody takes their time, and everybody's time is very important. We all have other things to do, and when it comes to open source, most people have a work on the side, and they might have a family and so on. So their time is very valuable, and the open source project that they are working on might just be something that they are passionate about to work on, but they might not have the time. So first off, your pull request might take some time until you actually get an answer. And sometimes they will answer you with a lot of changes, and maybe they are in a hurry, so they just tell you what's wrong and nothing else. And the important part to remember there is to try to be polite. As you are the person that have submitted the pull request, you want something to happen. You want to change something. You want some change, and it's a good way to create changes or make changes happen is to be polite and try to be respectful of others' time. So can you help out in any way so the coding review process is easier? Maybe you can explain things even more clearly if you have written something that is a little bit strange, or maybe you can change your code so you write it in a more distinct way so it's easier to understand for those that review, and so on. So it's always good to be polite, to be respectful, and to try to make the process as easy as possible. This is what I wanted to go through today. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you are excited to try to make some changes in some open source projects of your own. If you have any questions about the process, or if you have any comments about the process and something that you might do differently, then please leave them in the comment section down below. I read everything and I try to answer the most of the comments. And if you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. And I really hope to see you in the next video.